Yeah, welcome back, everybody. I'm Mark Wallace. I run a company called Wello Horld. It's building a new kind of social platform for the web, so hopefully we'll see these guys virtual goods on it sometime next year. But I spent a long time before that as a journalist covering virtual worlds and social networks and things like virtual goods, so I'm excited to have these guys here, especially since virtual goods in the context of social networks especially has seen such amazing growth lately over the past couple of years, right? And as social networks have become more ubiquitous, so have virtual goods. You know, and the most unexpected people are sending you, little virtual flowers and little pets, people you never thought you would see on a virtual network in the first place, and now, your mother is sending you, some kind of virtual good that you're expected to respond to and engage with, and it's just amazing how much more mainstream they've become recently. I wanted to start by asking these guys to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about exactly what kind of virtual goods each of them offers in the context of social networks, and also to talk about the market a little bit on a broader basis, if you like. Some of the numbers that have gone around in the last number of months, trying to peg the market, have been anywhere from 1.5 to $2 billion on an annual basis, right? And I'd like to see whether you guys have your own opinions about how accurate those are, or just talk a little bit about how you see the virtual goods market in terms of becoming mainstream, like I was mentioning a minute ago. So why don't we just go down and start with you, David?
Sure. Hi. So my name is David King, and I'm the founder of Low Green Patch. And we're basically a virtual world with virtual goods on primarily on Facebook, but across the social media properties. It's basically, the concept of the app is that you tend a virtual fruit garden with your friends, and we donate ads revenue towards saving the rainforest. So it kind of has a social good component to it as well. Regarding market size estimates, I think it's one of these things where it's sort of all in the cracks and crevices, so it's really hard for us to judge, is it $1 billion or $2 billion, in total value of the virtual goods market today, versus other kind of, where's it going to grow, and what is it kind of filling in all these cracks? Is there kind of a large roll up that kind of we see from that? So it's really hard for us to judge. I mean, $2 billion, yeah, it could be.
Is it filling in the cracks?
I think stuff like what we're doing is sort of filling in cracks and pieces here and there, but we're not a major part of that. We're just getting started.
The Little Green Patch is actually a very big patch at this point. It's very successful. My name is Shervin Pishevar. I'm the founder of SGN, Social Gaming Network. We've done a little over 120 million virtual gifts and goods exchanged. And we're really happy. We recently announced that Fluff Friends became part of the SGN family. It was created by an amazing engineer, great product instincts, Mike Seago, who's built an amazing community of just fluffaholics is what I call them. But there's a lot of love and engagement and the exchange of goods and gifting of goods, of little cute pets in the game. And we're really, really excited about having that as a part of the SGN family. So we've built a whole team around it. We've also begun to launch some more games built on the user pay model. And we've also just launched our first iPhone games that in the first less than a month we're at about 2 million users. We're looking forward to the day that Apple allows you to do transactions on a per item basis rather than purchases.
Hi, my name is John Hwang. I'm the creator of Speed Racing. It's a car racing application on several social networks like Facebook, MySpace, High Five, and Xiaonei, which is a Chinese-based social network. And Speed Racing is part of RockYou apps, and I am managing the automotive vertical for that for RockYou. And in terms of the actual app, what it does is it's an application that allows users to find a car, pimp it out, modify it, and race their friends in a fun way. So the app is inherently competitive, within like the social networks, because the users like being able to race their friends and compete against them, as well as a self-expression app where users can pimp out their car to a point that they can brag about it on their profile pages. And we've certainly seen a interest in the virtual goods space because there's virtual auto parts and things like that within the app, and users are willing to pay money for those things. So there's definitely a monetization component around the virtual goods. And certainly in terms of the market size, I can't say for sure what that market size is, but it has to be at least $1 billion, otherwise we wouldn't all be here. And we wouldn't have a bunch of VCs interested in it as well, right? Because you have to have $1 billion market for it to make sense. But in terms of the actual number, it's hard to say. I mean, some of the analysis that I've seen online in terms of per transaction and percentage of users that are actually paying, they are very realistic. So 1.5 to 2 million does sound very, very reasonable. And for the social networking space, I think it's still in its nascency, and we are just trying to figure out the virtual goods component on social networks. It's not like the destination sites that actually have their entire business model around it, but certainly within the social networking space, there is money to be made, and in aggregate, it is in the billions.
Hi, I'm Andrew Trader. I go by AT. Call me AT. I'm one of the co-founders of Zynga. We're a leading social game developer. We've got about 25 applications on 5 networks, and I manage our business areas: sales, marketing, business development. And for us, we look sort of aspirationally at Nexon's MapleStory, which in the U.S. alone did $30 million in micropayments in 2007. So that to me says that with a relatively niche product that can do that kind of volume, games that we believe appeal more to a mass market will certainly have an opportunity to generate significant revenues.
So where are we in terms of the market? Because it's on the one hand, it's true that almost all of my Facebook friends have got some virtual goods like stapled onto their profile, right? And yet, a couple of you have mentioned that things are kind of incipient, or you're dealing with a niche market. And is it a mainstream market yet, or is it something that's just starting to develop? Has it been around longer than we usually think? What's your Shervin?
I mean, if you look at the Fluff Friends community, it's all over the world, and the demographics are well dispersed, with everyone from 45-year-old women to 19-year-old boys and girls, I guess, in college. So the demographics are everywhere, and this is a user pay model. I mean, it's very similar to what AT is talking about. Is we're looking at a free-to-play. And looking at ways of getting people to actually purchase items that they get value from and entertainment from, and what we call love from, in terms of exchanging between their users. And the ARPUs, or the average revenue per user, is actually quite good. And I think in the first examples on the social networks like Facebook and MySpace, most of these games are profitable as individual games. So the metrics are really good. The analytics that we've built around it are good, and I think it's definitely has already the indications that it can be a mass consumer play in terms of entertaining many people. And I think also in the current economic environment that we're in, it'll be interesting to see what impact that would have, whether positive or negative, in terms of wherever people cocoon and look for ways to entertain themselves with microtransactions rather than spending $50, $60 on one game. spending $1 or $2 at a time.
Can you guys give us a sense of what kind of ARPUs you're seeing? Who wants to start? Jump in on that.
AT, you wanna?
Actually, I wanted to answer the first question.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
So to address, yes, definitely this is early stages for micro payments on social networking games. I think what's really most relevant is that the micro payments, the virtual goods, need to be really well integrated into the game, and they have to be items that users find valuable. And the example I want to use today is Yeovil, which I think is the best example, has the richest set of virtual goods of any of our applications, and it, from a demographic standpoint, it mirrors Facebook, right? I mean, we have about 250,000 daily active users. We do in the neighborhood of $4,000 to $5,000 a day in revenues across CPM and micro payments, and that the demo definitely mirrors Facebook, about 50-50 male female, about 2/3 international. So to me, it feels like there's definitely, we're just on the cusp of a mass market opportunity. It still remains to be seen whether it will really get there, but it certainly feels like it's got a fighting chance.
And I think we've seen the behavior. You look back, what was it, about 8 years ago, 7 years ago? James Hwang was selling, virtual flowers on Hot or Not, and even the U.S. audience has some appetite for stuff like that. And you look just years and years back, things like Cyworld in Korea. There's just huge economies that develop around virtual items. So we're pretty optimistic that there's been shown some strength in this kind of stuff internationally. There's a few examples of this happening domestically already. And it's not like it just happened in the last 6 months or just since Facebook launched. There actually is appetite. People buy e-cards and stuff like that. So I think there is a business that can be built on things like this.
I think from my perspective, it's definitely in the mainstream in other countries, maybe not as much yet in the U.S., but there's, predominantly the speed racing users are in the U.S. and Canada and UK, and certainly there has been an appetite, in the orders of $3 to $4 transactions that users are actually, paying because they might have gotten on the game a little bit later than their friends and needed to catch up. I think the important thing is to keep the game still fair to everybody else, in the sense that there's a global leaderboard for the people that are playing the game, and then there's also a local leaderboard for with your friends, so that you can't just buy your way up to the top, but you can certainly pay to catch up and to upgrade your car to a point where it is competitive enough where you can play against your friends, but you still need to work your way in the game in order to catch up to them. But the fact that there's $3 to $4 transactions happening, these micro transactions happening all the time, certainly goes to show a lot of promise on the game. And we're seeing it being becoming a larger and larger portion of our revenues. Right now it's about 30-40% of our revenues, but it increasingly becomes more as time goes on, because users do get engaged in the game, and you have to keep refreshing the game to keep them interested in paying. And then the people that don't want to pay will continue to play the game for free, and the other portion of revenue is ad inventory, ad impressions on the game, and those users get to play the game just fine, and it's ad supported. So, but certainly it's becoming mainstream, if not very close to being there.
Just want to touch on there's a definite direct correlation between engagement revenue and the creation and launch of new content. So you can't just expect to launch something and not invest the resources and time into giving the community more and more interesting new content and items. So, for example, on Fluff for International Pirates Day, we had a whole treasure hunt where there was all kinds of treasures and jewels that people could go and search each other's profiles on Fluff Friends and discover them, and they could make items with with what they discovered, and that always has an effect on the actual engagement and the end, the revenue as well.
Right. In that sense, it's you face the same challenge that a standalone virtual world or massively multiplayer online game faces, which is that your users chew through whatever content you place in the world, and you've got to keep a constant flow of new content coming in to keep that kind of mini economy going. So because we're talking about social networks specifically, I want to ask you guys if there are ways in which the challenges differ, or whether there are advantages to doing this within the context of a social network, rather than as something that's say more standalone or that exists outside that kind of community.
And I'll speak on that. I think like for speed racing, like it's important to update the application with fresh content to keep users engaged. But the difference between building on a social network like Facebook or MySpace is that their user base continues to grow. So as their user base grows, it directly correlates to how much our user base grows. And we're still seeing some double-digit growth on a month-over-month basis, which is may not necessarily be correlated to the fact that we're updating the content, but certainly correlated to the fact that there is growth on those social networks still, as opposed to the standalone sites, which they have a much more difficult job of continuing to attract new users. The social networks do that for us, and it's our kind of in our interest to also update the content. But it's great that we can kind of ride on the coattails of these networks that are growing.
I'm going to give a little shameless plug for Yeovil. Right now, you can buy carvable pumpkins and costumes in advance of Halloween, which I think is really fantastic. But that speaks to the requirement for developing content, and that's really an expensive proposition. So, like in my mind, it does give an advantage to larger developers who have more resources to put against development of content. But certainly, Fluff Friends is a great example where a single engineer was able to develop a really rabid user base. In terms of advantages or disadvantages, I'm actually going to take the counterpoint. There's disadvantages to being on a social network because you don't control your users. The social networks do. So we get to utilize some of the information via the APIs, but the networks control the users, and that actually makes fraud and cheating bigger problems. So whereas if I had a direct relationship with my users, I would be able to develop fraud systems and cheating mechanisms that would be able to address it better. But herein lies a great opportunity, which I hope all of my fellow panelists would join me in suggesting to Facebook and to MySpace and the other platforms that there really is a great opportunity in being a micropayments, or at least a payment processing provider, providing that service as an alternative to the existing options.
Yeah. And hopefully, Facebook has been talking about that for a while, and hopefully we'll see that coming about. That'll make it much more seamless for people to conduct the transactions within Facebook. But going back to your question, I think the next stage of the evolution for all or some of us is really exploring the idea of standalone sites like a flufffriends.com, for example, and seeing what differentiation there could be there. And having the Facebook and the MySpace versions be in sync and be anchors for these standalone sites, but there's a lot more you can do as a standalone service, even just in terms of the content that could have an effect on the engagement levels and revenues and so on. But also with Facebook Connect, both for the website and also later for the iPhone, there's lots of interesting possibilities there to connect the dots.
I want to come back in a second to the question you guys dodged a couple of minutes ago about numbers and ARPUs, but I am going to ask it again. But before we get there, I want to ask whether you guys see a a tenure for purchasers of virtual goods. Do you see people coming on and remaining engaged with these kinds of products, or do you see them coming in and engaging with these goods for a limited amount of time and then kind of going away again? Can you talk about that, David?
Yeah, I think we see a lot of continued engagement over time, and I think the key to kind of continued engagement when you have like a pretty lightweight kind of the beginnings of what could be a deeper experience. I think the way that you keep that engagement there is by kind of having a constant, almost kind of treadmill of new media, new experiences, somewhat exciting things, like take the strength that you have and then sort of build on it, but always keep changing. So, for example, if you come back to Little Green Patch once a week, there's always something new there for you. Like always some new plants. There's some, sometimes new games. There's always something new, so that if you go a week or two without visiting, you're going to be missing out. And so we really kind of added media and experiences which would cause cause it to stay fresh.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys have similar experiences?
Well, actually, I was going to say, not only does keeping the content fresh important, but in Yeovil we enabled trading. So users can trade their items, and they can buy items from each other, which is remarkably powerful for building a community, because now users are able to interact with each other, not just with us, the host. And that's done a couple of things. So number one, it really does encourage users to buy things, because they know that there's a there's a secondary market that they can take advantage of, and also it gives rise to rare items. So items if you only provide limited numbers of certain items, specialty items or holiday items, those things will appreciate over time.
Yeah, I mean, Fluff Friends was really, Mike Zigo really innovated around there in terms of multiple currencies and limited edition items within Fluff Friends, so that some items that were limited edition really accrued incredible value, to the point of some of them being worth hundreds of dollars within the community, and people actually purchasing it within Fluff Friends. But definitely, I think there is. You do find the core community, and you should focus, as Fluff Friends has, on that core community and what their needs are and what their wants are, and sometimes understanding that what they're asking for isn't necessarily what they actually want, and having insights there. But yeah, I mean, I think focusing on that core community and making them happy and engaged, and continuing to give them new content is what leads to a long-standing product like Fluff Friends continuing to grow and monetize. So.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me, because the things that I think all of you guys do involve a lot of interaction between users, right? You're not just purchasing a virtual good purely as a gesture of self-expression, right? And in fact, if you boil it down, what's happening in these contexts on places like Facebook and MySpace is just the same thing that's happening in a standalone virtual world or massively multiplayer online game, just without a lot of the bells and whistles necessarily. And that in that context, we know that there's an average life of a user of a little less than a year, I think, and I wonder what it will turn out to be for you guys. Maybe which it may be enhanced by the fact that it's taking place in this other context. I don't know. A couple of panels ago, Sean Ryan was talking about people seeing. I'm also interested in what proportions of users on a social network are purchasing virtual goods, right? And we heard some numbers that were like 3%, 5%, 8%. Do you guys have numbers that are in that range, or does it differ in the context that you're operating in?
It definitely depends. I would say that those estimates also feel really high. But one of the things I was going to say is anytime you introduce an economy to a game, it's really, really complex. managing an economy, because anytime you can that inflation is introduced, it can potentially ruin users' experiences, right? So you have to manage the economy. How coins or tokens or currency, whatever it might be, is going in, how it's manipulated and utilized inside the game, and then how does it come out of the game? It's always shocking to me the lengths that users will go to gain currency or gain an advantage within the game. So we had users who were like scores of users who developed their own bots because they found out that in our slot machines the odds were just tilted a little bit to the users, so people went crazy to try to take advantage of it. And it's hard to tell sometimes the difference between a power user and cheats.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the currency does, once you do create an economy, people are obsessed with the points, and we've seen a lot of fraudulent activity as well on our applications, and we continue to see it, and we're like, wow, there's a glaring hole there, and we have to patch it up. But we do see, I think 3 to 5% of users is certainly possible. I think from our perspective, we see about 10% of users actually trying to pay for currency, into the game, and then of those 10%, another 10% of them actually do complete it. I think from my point of view, it's kind of a fine line that you want to take when you allow users to buy currency, which is in a way kind of helping them level up faster and rather than playing the game. So there's this kind of fine balance that you have to have with allowing users to just pay for it versus actually continuing to play, and that's where some of the dual currency plays in, where you can only let users buy a certain currency that can be used for certain things. But certainly, I think single-digit percentage of users, low single digits is certainly possible, because we've seen it on speed racing for users paying to play the game.
And John, what kind of revenue do you make off these each of these users on an average basis?
So we see double-digit, like per 1,000 active daily users. It's certainly I've seen numbers as high as $75 to $200 per 1,000 daily actives, but we don't see, at least on our application, we don't see it that high. It is in the double digits, but it's also something that we make it hard for users to get points for paying money, because it kind of ruins the experience and it kind of creates this inflation of points. So we don't want to make it too easy, but certainly double digit, like $30, $40 per 1,000 daily actives.
Hey, wait a second. If I'm going to make it easy for everybody, you have to make it easy for everybody. I don't have a calculator in front of me. What does that mean?
What do you mean? What do you mean by easy?
What kind of revenue are you doing?
I'll tell you if you tell.
I already did.
No, we're seeing like $20, $30 per 1,000 daily actives.
He has 230,000 daily actives, right?
Yeah, about 230,000 daily actives.
You can do the math.
Anything from these quarters here?
No comment.
It's a very small fraction of users who are interested in paying. Like, majority of users are not going to pay. So if you take the average across users, it's like pennies, probably not even a penny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, it's really healthy, but we're just not we're not disclosing how much Fluff, for example, is making.
Mm-hmm. David, I wanted to ask you to talk about, because you, partially because your Little Green Patch has I don't know that it's a different model, but you have such a more strongly social mission. Whether you see any differences to the challenges that you face, and also whether you were able to apply any of the lessons that you may have learned at places like Google to what you're doing now.
Right. So, yeah, I think if you look at sort of Google's whole business, it really is primarily a microtransactions engine. Selling advertising space on a cost per click basis is kind of one of the very first models of microtransactions. Now, you're not buying a virtual good, but you're doing you're just pushing huge volumes of tiny little fractions, pennies. Like you can bid 5 cents a click, and get traffic. So, in a sense, like I think most of the web is about moving from these kind of major publishing models with kind of editor-in-chief to really kind of, like I said at the beginning, you're sort of filling in the cracks, and just like it's kind of like the thousand flowers bloom. You're really just kind of scooping up nickels here and there where it makes sense. But overall, you're sort of focused on building like a great publisher product and a great publisher community, so that people kind of can come and participate. And then it's same as what we saw at Google, like very small percentage of people actually click on ads, but you can actually make money at ads, even if it's just pennies per, because there is some percentage of people who actually do that kind of thing. And then that varies based on if it's a search business, and it varies based if it's like a content business. So in the same way, if it's kind of a Yoville or a Fluff or a Little Green Patch, like they're each going to have their own kind of characteristic. And I think there's things like Yoville is like a much more kind of an engaging, like virtual world to kind of walk around with an avatar. That's like a different set of kind of triggers in somebody's, kind of the way people engage with it, versus something like Little Green Patch, which is more of like a cause-based, mission-driven business. So like they're just going to have significantly different characteristics, similar to how you might see different characteristics if you're monetizing an automotive blog and looking at kind of the RPM you get on that versus monetizing like a little arts and crafts hobby blog.
Right.
Actually, one of the things I was going to say to that, Mark, is we learn a lot of lessons from offline merchandising to online, because Yoville has such a large catalog of items now that merchandising is an important element of what we do. So based on your demographics, and then based on a bunch of other optimization characteristics, that's how that's how items are shown to our users. And we just sort of took that straight from sort of offline retailing 101.
And John, any lessons from offline auto parts sales that you guys utilize?
We're still trying to figure that one out, but it seems like automotive is very universal. Like everyone likes cars, and so if you're living in the virtual world, you have to use Little Green Patch too to kind of eliminate the virtual emissions that are being created by our cars.
Kind of related to this, but we did actually for the first time create little fluff pets, actual physical pets. It's just limited run of 8,000 of them, and we're looking at ways of actually tying the purchase of those to unlocking of special limited edition virtual goods.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of like the reverse of Webkins.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Right. That's interesting. Shervin, I also wanted to ask you, you mentioned an iPhone app, and especially as social networks reach out into the mobile space more and more, how are you guys planning to take advantage of that?
And we're looking forward to things like Facebook Connect for the iPhone, but we launched a game called iGolf in like September 22nd or so, and then followed up with iBowl. So it's like Wii-style gaming using the accelerometer. And again, we've reached 2 million downloads on altogether on both in that time frame. And what we're looking at is making these games through the updates increasingly social. So it's very early days. We'll see.
Am I going to be able to kind of wave my accelerometer, your accelerometer, and something will happen
right.
in the game?
Yeah. Eye-boxing would be nice.
Okay, good. That's good. Anyone else reaching out in that way?
Well, I just want to say, I think, first of all, congratulations to Shervin. The apps are fantastic, and congrats on the success. Feels to me like the iPhone is a fantastic social device, but in order for it to really be, there's a lot more opportunity there, right? For it to be an even better social networking platform. You're sitting right on top of all your contacts, and you're sitting right on top of ways to, so therefore you have ways to invite your friends, to notify your friends of what you're doing and what games you're playing. So if and when Apple gets to the point where they enable some more of those social features, it'll really help the applications grow. And as soon as they enable support for microtransactions, it'll provide a business model.
Yep.
That relates to another question I was going to ask you guys, which is what do you want to see from the social network platforms that you're not seeing now? Like what are the obstacles that you face there, and what can the social networks do to help you?
I think the payment system, as AT talked about, is probably number one in our minds in terms of helping make it a bit more seamless. They have people actually have funded accounts with their credit cards, and they don't have to fill out any PayPal forms or anything like that anymore. They just click, and it's somewhat similar to what's going on in the iPhone in terms of impulse buys of 99 cents or even $9.95, and you're not whipping out a credit card, you're just purchasing it over your phone. So it makes it a bit more seamless.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the main thing for being able to monetize. There are advantages and disadvantages to working on these social networks, and one of the disadvantages, as AT alluded to, is the fact that you don't have complete control over the users. And what we've noticed also is that users on these social networks don't necessarily want to sign up for another account. They don't want to necessarily create another username and password to create a currency, to buy currency, right? So it would be great, to work and partner with these social networks to just have it seamless, because users aren't going to. There's just a huge barrier to account creation, and so if we do have some sort of partnerships with the social networks and sharing the revenue, I think everyone wins.
Yeah, and fraud really is a big deal. Setting up your own payment processing, a third-party payment processor it's a long process. It's a complicated process. All of them still make it very difficult, especially if you don't have a long track record. The overhead of running customer service related to billing issues and payment issues. Again, it's a terrific opportunity for the social networks.
And what about in terms of getting your content in front of new users? You guys have all done very well at that, which is why you're up here. But as we know, there are hundreds and hundreds or thousands of people struggling to do as well, right? And what worked for you? Can you talk a little bit about what worked for you and what you would say to those people, and maybe how the landscape has changed? Like, is there as much room for doing that on a small scale as there was?
Can I just add one more thing? It's kind of related to this, but I think the social networks like Facebook and MySpace can do a better job at the discovery process of finding for users to find entertaining new applications and games to play, and whether it's actually creating a games channel and taking the lessons of everyone's used the friend finder, I forgot what it's actually called, but on Facebook, where it's recommending your friends and it's looking at how many of your friends have actually played, and we've had to kind of do similar things like that in terms of what games your friends are playing, so you're building kind of a gaming graph. But I think if that becomes more and more a part of the actual platforms themselves, it would be helpful for increasing engagement for everyone and raising everyone up.
For us, it was about self-expression. I think for a lot of the games, it could be about competition, but specifically for Yeovil, it was all about self-expression, right? The idea that users could express themselves in the application made them want to share that with their friends, and that was very compelling. The best example is, like, maybe the ultimate example of self-expression is our users early on decided that they were going to hold beauty pageants. So they would go and buy clothes and buy accessories and hold competing beauty pageants. So of course, what we did to support that was we created virtual items that was like a stage for that the users could hold their beauty pageants on. Well, that was a disaster. So it needs to be a very authentic experience, that users can to have a forum for that self-expression, and I think that that's an incredibly powerful growth driver.
So talk a little more, you guys, about how you got here and what that landscape is like for people who are just entering the market now.
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty wide open still. So we're just really barely into the first inning of how, gaming looks on social networks. And there was a bunch of stuff which kind of didn't make sense and was aggressive and abusive of platforms in the past year, which I think a lot of that has been cleaned up. So actually, with the some of the recent changes and things like the Facebook platform, it's actually kind of a lot better for users. And we think that sort of over time, the higher quality publishers are going to be able to sort of get more exposure, just by sort of focusing on like a great product, like developing a community, really like creating a fantastic user experience, and sort of using kind of like game mechanics and things that kind of are truly social in nature. But I don't think that it's over. I mean, it's just barely beginning. So like, if you've got a great idea for something that would make sense on a social network, and this is a space you want to be in, like, I would say come up with a plan and launch it. Like, and then just plan though to just focus on building and improving the experience, because the bar is going to keep rising. So you need to sort of improve the experience over time, because I would say a year out, what kinds of things people are doing on Facebook are going to be significantly different than what they're doing today.
Right.
I mean, I think the policy platform changes have also been for the better, because it provides a more genuine experience. Obviously, there was a lot of abuse on the platform, and being able to kind of grow your application very quickly, to these exponential rates are not as easily done anymore, and that's for sure. But certainly, users are still going to want to interact with their friends. So kind of what David was saying is provide a great user experience, and you can get there. I think you're not going to see the 20x growth, day over day, but you can certainly still see growth. Like when MySpace launched, they kind of got to take a lot of the lessons from Facebook and saw the abuse, and they quickly eliminated a lot of the incentives that you could use to kind of send invites to friends and things like that. But still, on those social networks, you're still seeing tremendous growth, because if a user is engaged in a game, they will want to let their friends know about it. For example, on speed racing, the users do like customizing their cars and modding their cars and showing it off. And so when they finish modifying their car, they're going to post a bulletin which goes out to all their friends, and that's genuine interaction. They actually want to brag about their cars and let their friends see it. So it does continue to grow. Not nearly as fast as when these platforms initially launched, but still, I mean, if you compare it to trying to build a destination website by yourself, I mean, you're still going to see much faster growth on these social networks than on, trying to do it on your own.
Right. I want to see if anybody out in the audience has questions for these guys.
Actually, could I, before we do that, I just wanted to politely disagree with these two guys, because I think it's important to note that yes, there is growth happening on the social networks, but the barriers to entry, I think, are actually rising quickly, especially for smaller developers, because the production quality in all of these games is going up quickly and substantially, and the depth of content and the complexity of the applications also needs to keep pace, I believe, in order to keep growing. And so those barriers, it definitely gives advantages to incumbents, and definitely gives advantages to incumbents with significant resources.
So what AT is saying is, if you're an individual developer, come talk to Zynga.
Was it that thin? Was it thinly veiled?
Or come to talk to SGen.
I like how David said it was wide open and John said it was closing down, and AT managed to disagree with them both.
I think it's somewhere in the middle. I don't think it's that extreme. It also depends on, as an individual developer, if you're happy making 5 to 10 to 15K a month, which I think in this environment you should be, building your own game and app, then you can do that. Those days are not over. So I'm very hopeful, and I think for individual developers who want to remain independent, we need that. I mean, we need that in the space for innovation, and we're a network, so we help publish other people's games as well. So we look forward to seeing more innovation. Also, I think there is the more high quality, higher production games, and there is a place for that. And there's the virtual goods focused games where you have to keep creating content, and that's difficult for an individual developer to do. But then there's also other games that are just more in the minds of people and the logic of the games. I mean, if Mob Wars is an example of that, is where the developer is actually is actually there isn't as much content being launched. It's more the logic of the game and the sequence of how you get advanced. So, and there's other examples of that as well.
Great. Okay.
There are just two quick figures I'm going here. For a viable virtual world business, what's the average ratio of active to registered users in the industry, and what's a healthy retention rate and user life?
I think you could probably build a viable business not so much focused on the percent of retention, but more, having a really passionate community. So even if it's, I don't know if it's, should be 50%, 70% or 20%. But if you've got like a hugely passionate community that's only 20% of all the people who've been exposed to it, and then of that 20%, maybe 1% will actually pay. If you're talking large enough install numbers or large enough, people who've touched it, I think you can build a viable business. And then the question is, are we in an early stage of an explosive market? Has it already gotten as big as it's going to get, and there's not a lot of opportunity? That's sort of the question that I think is sort of outstanding, and that's where the risk and the opportunity lies.
Anybody else want to take a shot at that? Not really. Here.
I thought I was loud enough. Oh yeah. Could you talk about the cognitive process that users go through at the point of purchase? What obstacles are in the way? What things are motivating them and incentivizing them to go through with the purchase? What I'm getting at is how can we design better user experiences and interfaces to influence them more positively?
I think that's a great question. As I said before, I think that there's it has a lot to do with self-expression. And so we try to give users in Yeovil a terrific number of options. So, not just a pair of sunglasses, but sunglasses in 20 different colors and 5 different styles. Because it really is something that people are either trying to say like, hey, this is who I really am, or it could be more aspirational, like, hey, this is who I want to be. And that is, I think, a very important part of the decision to either make a purchase or not make a purchase.
Are there things that tip them over the edge in that way? Because as we know, there are a lot of obstacles between seeing those 25 pairs of sunglasses and even spotting one that I think that represents me, and then actually going and purchasing that item.
I think there's a lot of psychology involved in these games, and also, one of the things we talk about on the Fluff team is that it's kind of a mixture of DeviantArt and eBay, and combining those elements within those two, and self-expression is actually a key component of people wanting to actually get items and then do really unique things that I call kind of secondary user-generated content within these games that are always surprising, from people actually, one user writing a 65, 70-page children's book based on Fluff Friends and the characters and the stories, to videos that people have created that are just shocking in terms of the creativity that they put into it. And every item they put items together to create bigger items and songs and so on. And so that kind of community, that kind of passionate community that has that kind of love, that's investing that kind of time in their lives, for them to purchase, $5 or $10, it's valuable to them. So it brings it back to, if they're going to actually make that first purchase, they have to have that inspiration. that moment of inspiration that they got from the experience within the community to then want to engage in that way?
I think from like for speed racing users, it resembles very much like your status symbol, right? Because the type of car you drive in the real world is similar to the one that you drive in your virtual world for a lot of people. Now, not every user cares about their virtual appearance that much, but there are a set of users that do. So, you can see, like in the game, there's a progression to, you start like at a Chevy Aveo, and there's nothing wrong with the Chevy Aveo if any of you drive one, okay? But the reality is you would probably much rather be driving a foreign, car or something like that. And so, you can draw parallels to kind of your life in real life and then your life in your virtual world. And for a lot of these users, they'll never be able to drive a Lamborghini, right? So, the fact that they can pay like $50 to drive a Lamborghini in the virtual world is very gratifying to them. And so you can often draw these parallels to real world with these users and help them, bring them along to try to actually transact.
You drive a Lamborghini.
No, I drive a beat-up 96 car. So,
Who's
but
got the?
I'm very wealthy in the speed racing world, and I can drive whatever I want. So.
Who's got the mic?
I never got your game because I aspire to the Aveo.
Could you talk about the pros and cons of using real dollars as currency versus points or other forms of virtual currency?
Yeah. So I think when I look at it from, if I make an analogy, it's kind of like when you were a kid and you would go to the arcade, right? Like you would go and you would put your dollar in. They could accept quarters immediately, but if you change them out for coins, you have no idea how much you're spending, right? It's kind. Very analytical people will say, oh, this spoiler that I'm buying is actually costing me 0.01 cents or something like that. But most people, it's kind of like the arcade model where you go in, you change your dollar in for a currency, and then you spend it, and it's easier to spend that way. It's kind of what Vegas does all the time when you're playing blackjack, sort of. Like you get these chips at the roulette table, and you kind of put it out there, and you kind of lose track of what you're spending. But I think that kind of encourages users to buy.
Who else?
Earlier this morning, we heard a lot of talk in virtual worlds about secondary markets and C2C transactions. I'm just wondering why that hasn't sort of exploded on Facebook the way it has in virtual worlds.
I think it's early still. So, if you look, we're only, a year and a half into it on Facebook, which was kind of the, igniting platform for all of this. And, I think there's still so many kind of first level opportunities people are getting that it hasn't yet sort of risen to the level where there's kind of secondary markets, lots of user generated pieces, kind of scoring systems for all of that. I think a lot of that is the direction that it's going. So anything that, like, the web itself is not that different from the web on a social network. And kind of gaming itself is not going to be that significantly different. Like, it's all the same psychological drivers, the same kind of needs for expression. It's just sometimes amplified because you're doing it within sort of this river of fast-moving water where all of your friends are hanging out all the time. So I think it's just sort of like early stages of that, and like we'll see that stuff happen. That's part of like the bar rising on how these things look over the next few years.
So let's see if there's.
And it makes sense actually that that it hasn't happened right out of the gate, because if part of our motivation is to generate revenues off of these things, the C2C transactions don't necessarily give the host or developer a direct doesn't generate direct revenues for us, but it really is an important element to add depth to the game, and it builds community, and it really does create a lot of that secondary market. I think creates users who will sort of band together, and they create secondary items, and they'll want to then actually probably do some of their own item and content creation, which I think will be sort of the next stage that we'll get to, and I think that we're really close to that.
So I think we have time for one quick question if somebody's got a short one.
So what do you guys feel about customer retention, basically stickiness? Where do you all value current customers, and how much effort and time and cost for getting new users on your platforms?
Did you catch that question? Can you repeat that?
Just basically like stickiness of current users and how your time and effort and cost on getting new one, because the whole new platforms of Facebook and all are a little bit more difficult to get users.
I think we want to hear about how you improve retention rates on a platform like Facebook or a social network, as opposed to doing this outside of that context.
Yeah, I think, again, if you really focus on kind of good products, I think that kind of more engaging products will cause people to engage more. So engaging defined as, more features, more fun, more excitement, stuff like that. Like if we had to sort of either focus on getting new users or keeping the users we have like super engaged, we'd definitely focus on just keeping the users we have super engaged. Because I think that like getting, kind of providing better experiences, later on we can sort of get more users involved in what has become a great experience. But I think just getting people to experience something which is super lightweight and doesn't graduate beyond that is pretty short-sighted.
Okay, well, I think that we have to send you guys off to the 2 o'clock breakout session. So I just want to thank all of you for being here, and thanks to you guys. Thank you.